Welcome to episode 1 of the Speed Secrets podcast with today's guest, Frank Greif. Get ready to talk high performance and race driving and take away some tips and advice that you can use to be an even better driver.
Welcome to the Speed Secrets podcast. Join Ross Bentley and guests, drivers, instructors and coaches, engineers, officials, and others for conversations about high performance and race driving. Listen for tips and advice, thought-provoking ideas, and inspiration to take your own driving to the next level. Green, green, green!
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. Today's guest is a good friend of mine, Frank Greif, who started the racing at the young age of 64. Thanks for joining me, Frank.
Hey, thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, and hey, do you mind if I start off by telling the quick story about you and how you and I met?
Oh, no, I'd like to hear this. Your side of the story.
Yeah, and maybe do you remember it?
I sure do.
It seems like a long time ago, and it probably was. It was like 8, 9, 10 years ago. A mutual friend of ours invited me to go and drive in a endurance race in Portland, Oregon. The 8-hour race that's typically held at the end of the year, a club race, kind of a fun event for a bunch of people. But, like all fun racing, it turned into some serious competition. And we got down there and I met my co-drivers. And at one point between stints, I'm sitting in a camp chair next to one of my co-drivers, who happens to be Frank. And we start talking. And the next thing we know, we're kind of sharing stories about racing and driving and the experience of driving. And I learned that Frank is also a business coach, an executive coach, business consultant. And we kind of shared some of our thoughts about coaching, both in the business world and in racing. And I guess that was kind of our common, what kind of brought us together in the beginning was just this whole idea of helping people and coaching people. But, and sorry, Frank, but it's kind of led to our friendship for the last, since that time. But, and it just proves that point that I've often felt is, racing is fantastic. It's all about driving fast and having fun. And, whether it's track days or HPDE or racing wheel to wheel, ultimately it comes down to the people and the relationships that you build and develop through the sport. So it's been fun.
Absolutely. Ross, it's okay. My side of that story.
Yeah. Your turn.
That was at the end of my first year of racing. And the invitation was, okay, you've gone through that successful first year, come down and be part of this race team doing the Enduro. So great. So I go down there and I read this book, something called Speed Secrets or something like that. And here I am introduced to Ross Bentley. And I said, well, wait a minute. He's part of our team? Yes. So Ross Bentley's going to go out and drive, and then I'm going to get in the car? I mean, that's like having a touch-up artist for Picasso. Come on, wait a minute. But Ross, what I remember most of all is that you dissipated any of that tension by just, saying, well, here's some things to think about and all of that. And it was just absolutely great. And I would second your comment about the community part. I think because of the intensity that's involved in racing, the relationships become intense. There's no BS. You just get right to it. And either you're going to like the person or you're not. And if you don't like the person, then they go somewhere else, and you make really great friends. And the group that we had, we called it was the Race E30s, a group of us. And we had a little flag that said, friends between checkered and green. The thought that you could just have great friendship. When that green flag falls, look out. I'm going to beat you. And then we'll be friends again.
Yeah.
So, it's just been absolutely great. Yeah.
And I think that, I think of all of motorsport, whatever form of it is, it really is an extreme sport in that the people you meet are the most extreme people, the most extremely nice people that you'll ever meet, and great people. Unfortunately, there's a couple of extremely bad people, but we tend to ignore them. So how, and I guess more importantly, why did you get involved with racing, and how did all that happen?
Well, I'm one of those guys that, or women too, that I think I was born with a car gene. By 10, if a car went down the street, I could tell you what it was. Yeah. And I'm old enough, there weren't that many cars. Anyway, and so I've always been involved in cars. And as I grew up, I can remember going to the movie theater to watch the Indy 500 in black and white,
Wow.
all of that sort of stuff before it was on TV. Um, and and then I was involved in racing. I worked as a crew member for in the old Formula 5000 when they were up here in the Pacific Northwest. I did some of that stuff, always involved. And then I bought a BMW, and a friend of mine took me to the BMW banquet, and they were auctioning off the chance to use a race car and a coach for 3 novice races if you purchased it at the auction, which is what I did. And I raced in those 3 novice races. I had so much fun that within 6 months I bought a race car, something I had no idea I would ever do, and just jumped in with both feet and everything else I had.
Pretty
And
slippery slope, isn't it?
hugely slippery. And I owned that race car for 8 years and raced it up and down the West Coast. I went up to one of the great thrills was going up to Edmonton and racing in the warm-up race, the previous race, whatever you call it, the opening show for the Indy
Support
cars.
race, yeah.
Yeah, support race.
Yeah.
So it just, it's been really exciting. I've never regretted a minute of having done that.
So more in your future?
Well, yeah, I mean, I got to a certain age where, you have to be careful. and when you if you really push yourself, which you have to do to be right on the edge, fatigue, you have to be in good shape, and fatigue can catch up to you. And after a while, the whole effort of loading the car on and off the trailer, doing all of that, I decided to sell the race car. All right. So I sold the race car. Now I continued to instruct for the BMW club and all of that sort of stuff. And then I thought, well, it's been about a year and a half, 2 years that I, haven't been back in a race car. And I just had my annual physical, and the doc said my heart's okay. So I just happened to have with me the medical form that needs to be signed. That says,
You happen to have that, yeah.
well, I brought it along just in case he said I was okay.
Uh-huh.
So he did. He signed it. And so I'm going to race at least once more in my 76th year.
Wow.
Got to give it a try. Not going to give up.
Congrats on that. That's cool. So
Yeah.
And so obviously, and I mean, it sounds like you've been around the sport and followed it for many, many years. I remember you telling me a story about being in Europe and watching some cool cars and racers and stuff like that. So
Yeah, I got to do some great stuff. I was there in well, you know how old I am. So it was in the early 60s. I watched Dan Gurney race at the Nürburgring.
cool.
I can remember standing in the carousel, and you could look down as they came around the carousel. That was quite spectacular. And then I was there also at the Nürburgring to see the first running of the Ford GTs, GT40,
Wow.
all of that. And the excitement thing there was, what is it about racing that people really, really love? I mean, as an observer, for me, it's the sound, the colors, and the tension. Well, here you are in the forests of Germany, and you hear this huge roar for about a minute and a half to 2 minutes. You see anything, and then all these cars come cresting over the top of the hill. It's like stunning.
Yeah.
And I think what happens as a young man, for me, what happened then is I'm going to be involved in that somehow. It took a number of years, but I got there. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. So looking back now, what's the one thing you know now that you wish you'd known when you first started racing?
Wow, that's a great question. To pace myself. I think it's really easy it's an exciting sport. It's an adrenaline sport. So it's really easy to just jump in and go fast or jump in and buy a lot of crap.
Right.
It's like, the old thing about don't buy any more go fast equipment. Work on the nut behind the wheel, make that person go fast. And so I think that would be it. I wish I'd slowed down more in the first year or so. And what you have coached me over the years about, perfect practice makes something perfect, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say-
Whatever that is, we'll perfect it later.
What is your saying when you say that?
Practice doesn't make perfect. Only perfect practice makes perfect.
Perfect. Yes, absolutely.
And I wish I could claim that I actually made that up, but I think I probably stole that from somebody too. So.
Well, anybody who's in the coaching business, and I've been in the coaching business for 30 years now, has stolen everything. So
right.
That's understandable.
Yeah.
But the idea that well, I'll tell you one thing that is really important. When I took my first class, I knew two things for certain. I'm a man and I know how to drive. Well, I immediately discovered one of those was wrong. So I'm still a man. I didn't know how to drive. I thought I knew how to drive.
Right.
And so I'm going to just jump in it and go. And, and so that was really, I'll never forget one of my very first races. My brother-in-law came to the racetrack, and he's known me for years and always known I love motorsports and whatnot, all of that. And he came out, and I was dead last. And I think I'd been lapped,
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "God, why are you so slow?" I just said, "Dean, you have no idea how difficult this is." He said, "You just drive, don't you?"
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And I think that's the problem with, a problem, in air quotes here is everybody drives.
Yeah.
Practically everybody drives. So the idea of driving a car on a racetrack, the average person, anybody listening to this knows what that means. But
Right.
the average person people that aren't listening to this, they don't get that. They just think that it's, how different can it be? I can drive down the interstate for 4 hours and it doesn't bother me any. Why would you be tired after a 30-minute race?
Yeah. So one of the ways that I come to explain that to people, because, you always get the question, well, how fast do you go?
Mm-hmm.
Say, 325.
Yeah.
Okay. But the answer is, well, it's not how fast you go, because anybody can drive a car really fast in a straight line. And so what I do to reference what they know is I say, think about going on an off ramp in the rain at 40 miles an hour. And you're kind of going, ooh, Well, now go at that off ramp with 5 cars around you at 80 miles an hour.
Yeah.
That's what racing is.
Yeah.
It's not going in a straight line real fast. And that takes skill and attention. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's, I'm sure it's, the difference between driving on the street and driving on the track is like the difference between, flying a model car and flying a fighter jet.
Yes.
It's that big a difference. And yet, because everybody drives, it's just, I actually think it's one of the great things about our sport is that it's so accessible. Almost anybody can go and do track days. They can do high performance driver education events. They can, go out and do club racing. They can get involved with racing, and they can go up to competing in professional level sports in racing. And almost anybody can do that. And there aren't very many sports that are that accessible. How many other sports can you go and play in the major stadium? If you're a tennis player, can you play at center court at Wimbledon? No.
Oh.
If you are a football fan, can you go and play in your favorite football team stadium? No. If you're a track guy, you can go down to COTA in Austin. You can go to Road America. You can go to all these amazing, fantastic racetracks and drive at the same place that the world's top player or drivers compete at. So
Right.
it's a pretty cool sport that way.
You asked a couple of minutes ago about what one of the big surprising things, and that accessibility was a big surprise to me. I didn't realize how easy it is to get involved. I mean, it does. If you're going to buy a race car, you do that sort of thing. It's an expensive proposition, but it doesn't have to be.
Right.
I mean, there are people who race probably twice a year here in the Northwest that rent a race car for the weekend.
Right.
So you can do it at whatever level you like. I'm thinking about why the other part of accessibility is the age thing. I talked about how you got to be careful about maintaining concentration and whatnot. So I love extreme sports, skiing, all that sort of stuff and whatnot. I'm not going to go skiing over a mogul field now and whatnot. But if I can do an extreme sport sitting in a chair, not only sitting in a chair, but strapped into the chair, I'm going to do that. And that's what I get to do.
So is the sport too accessible?
Oh, gosh, great question. I think, yeah. I think you need to be careful there.
I mean, does that lead to the pacing part that you mentioned earlier? That
Oh,
it's,
absolutely.
it's so
Yeah.
easy to jump in and just start doing it. And
Yeah. Well, with all the advent of all the things, whether it's the World Racing League, Lucky Dog, Chump Car, lemons, all of that. Yeah, there are a lot of people who can get in real quickly without a whole lot of training,
mhm.
and I think that is a real problem.
Hmm.
I don't know whether it's a safety problem or not, but it is certainly a problem for people who want to really develop the skill. Because you can get into a chump car or whatever and do your 1 or 2 hour stint or whatnot and drive around and da 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 da. If you're serious about, I want to be really good at this, then it takes a little more discipline.
Yeah, yeah. So have you had one of those big aha moments? One of those moments when you were driving a time when just everything clicked and you went, "Oh, that's the secret to going fast. That's what it takes." Some
No, I've always been too damn slow. No.
No, hey, I've watched you. You're not too damn slow.
Well, can I tell a story about you helping me with that? Because you've coached me over time, which I greatly appreciate. There is a section at Pacific Raceways outside of Seattle where you go through turn 5A. You're going at a pretty good clip. It's a gentle right, then a pretty hard left, a short distance, and then another right-hander. And if you hit the curb on the apex on your left, it's a left-hand turn, and then a short run, and then go to the right. You get a little bit airborne and all of that. So it can be intimidating. And I remember you were on the radio to me as I came through there saying, you can go much faster. That distance between 5A and 5B is longer than you think. And then went out and walked it and realized, yeah, you know what? Yeah, if I really get on the brakes when I need to set myself up for the right-hander 5A or 5B, I can come through here much faster. And I started doing that, and then you back it up the little hill coming up to it. I'd always either lift just a little bit or tap the brakes. No, you can do this. So the heart's in my throat, all of that, make that turn to the left, and wow, hey, it's not unstable. It gets a little wonky, but I can control it. And when I started doing that, that was like, this is so damn cool. Yeah, right there.
It's interesting how the more you attack, the more throttle you use, the car is more comfortable, right?
It's counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
Which is, I think is the biggest challenge. And, I must get, I don't know how many emails every single week from people just asking a question about driving in some form. And, probably one of the most common one is, well, how do I know? Like, how do I know where that limit is? And what was interesting, I'll just tell this quick story of this year. A technique that I've actually used a number of times this year is just asking a driver, what percentage of a lap do you spend with your foot flat to the floor? Full throttle, 100% throttle. Mm-hmm. And, I don't really care what the driver comes back with. They could say 10%, they could say 90%. When I really get them to really think about it, for most tracks, it's somewhere in the 40 to 60% of the lap they spend at full throttle. And I said, okay, next time you go on track, if you think that you're at 40% of the lap at full throttle, aim for 43%. Go for 3% more.
Yeah. Okay.
And, if you then just start thinking about, okay, where can I get on the throttle a fraction of a second earlier? Where can I stay on the throttle rather than coming up to 5A and kind of breathing the throttle and easing out of it before you start to brake? Just stay into full throttle all the way to that point where you brake. And then where are those little gaps in between, like between 5A and 5B at Pacific Raceway, where you can just give a little squirt of full throttle for a fraction of a second. All of a sudden, you're spending 3% more of the lap at full throttle, and boom, lap times just dropped like dramatically. So it's interesting, all those tiny little things. Yeah, that's the part that people go, hey, I drive on the highway all the time. It's no big deal.
That's right. Yeah. So, as you're saying that, what you're asking this question about, well, I never really thought about how much time I kept my foot on the floor.
Yeah.
What you're doing in coaching, and I do in my coaching, and I think anybody who's really kind of involved in this, in the motorsports thing, whether you're a high performance driver or racer, is it for me, leadership is about developing self-awareness. How do I behave as a leader? Well, as a driver, it's also the same thing. Self-awareness about exactly what am I doing. One of the really great tools you gave me is about, perfect practice, making things perfect. Going out in a practice session for 3 laps and paying attention only to what you're seeing. Just what are you looking at? Come back, write that down. Then go out and what are you hearing? What do the tires sound like in this part of the corner? What's the pavement sound like there? All of that sort of thing. And then the capper for me is go out there and what are you feeling? What are you feeling in your butt? What are you feeling in your fingers? What are you feeling at 3 laps, and come back and write that down? By becoming truly aware of what's going on in each one of those sensory inputs, that made a huge difference.
Yeah, it's funny. Well, the awareness thing, and I was actually going to ask you the question of, what have you learned from your business career, your business coaching career, and previous careers in business and things that actually applies to driving on the track? Because a lot of times we go, there's so many lessons we learn on the track that we can take away and put into the rest of our life and business. Let's turn that around. What goes the other way?
Okay, that's great. In business, you face big, hairy problems. The way you solve them is to break them down into their component parts. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we've been talking specifically about what's happening behind the wheel. But let's talk about a race weekend. What are the components? One of the things that took me a while to learn was that, let's say it's a race day, it's getting to the track early, so you're not rushed. And when you're doing club racing, there are all kinds of family around and all of that sort of thing. In business, you need quiet space. Business is going a million miles an hour. Okay, stop. What are we doing here? What are we trying to achieve? Let's just take a deep breath and figure out what is our, in my business, I call it, what's your strategic intent? What is it you're really trying to do? Mm-hmm. And so for me, one of the things that I took out of that and asked myself as I was racing was, if I had a client, what would I be saying to them? And it would be, before you get in the car, go away. Be by yourself, because as you can tell, because I'm talking a lot, I love getting with people, and there's excitement. And so there's all these people around. Well, then you get in the race car and, oh God, I got to go do this. No, go get in the trailer, go for a walk, do something, but just be yourself, quiet. That was a real thing to take over from the business to the other. And then the other really important part, which is really hard for lots of folks who I think are in leadership positions and or get into something like that. And that is, do not be afraid to ask for help. Whether it's help in loading the car on the trailer,
yeah,
or it's help with anything. Most importantly, about developing your skill set. Do not be afraid to ask for help. You will not be seen as an idiot or somebody who doesn't really know what they're doing and all of that. I'll guarantee you, people at the very top end of the business ask for help, whether it's business or racing.
All right.
Don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah. Interesting. So I've actually heard you say three big things. The awareness piece that we talked about, which comes from doing those sensory input things and, being aware of how much time you spend at full throttle, preparation, and asking for help. Those are pretty cool things, pretty cool lessons.
Right.
That, hey, they do apply to whatever
Sure.
you're doing, but definitely. And, when I look at it and I kind of go, I look at some of the best drivers that I've ever worked with, the, elite level pros, that's what they do. When I look at, because I work with a lot of drivers who are coming into the sport, they're relatively new, they're participating in a HPDE, a high performance driver education event, and they're relatively new to the sport. And the ones that seem to progress the fastest, those same 3 things I'm gonna write those down and keep those, Frank. So, prepare, practice being aware and ask for help. Those are pretty cool things.
Yeah.
So, is there a specific driving technique that you discovered that in your driving, you're kind of like, when you first start driving, you're going, hey, I'm just, I got to get the right line, I got to get, I got to brake late, whatever. But was there kind of a moment where you're going, oh, it has to do with this specific driving technique that really sort of popped out, went, boy, that's what really made a big difference?
Oh, I think if there's one thing, it's a broken record, right? You say it over, you hear about it all the time. It's about where you're looking. Where are you looking? There's so much about that. The thing, the hands follow the eyes, all of that. And what I really discovered is that the most important thing about looking forward, for me, way forward, is it's relaxing.
Right.
It's an amazing thing if you can be disciplined enough to do that and just go, okay, oh yeah. And it is, I don't know whether this is accurate or not, but the story I make up about it is that what you're doing is putting your consciousness up, as far ahead as you can see, and letting the unconscious and the skill set you've practiced take over and just kind of run, do whatever it needs to do while you, are thinking about, well, okay, I'm however far around the track I can see or whatever. That has just made a huge difference. And to play off of the question you had a minute ago about what have I learned in business that I brought to the track, probably the biggest thing I've taken from the track to the business and to the people I coach is that concept of looking ahead. And so when I'm working with groups, I actually draw a track map and I talk about that sort of thing and about, in business, we're focused on, God, what's right in front of us? What's this big problem? Where in fact, you know how to solve those problems. Where do you want to go after the problem? And you bring that back into the car when you're in that group of 5 cars going around the corner at 80 miles an hour or 72 in the rain. And it's like, that's the time that it's really easy to drop your eyes and just get frantic. And it's like, no, eyes up. That just, I think that's the most important thing. That's what's relaxed me. The times I've gotten in trouble, I can always take back to, I dropped my eyes.
And you'd mentioned earlier that you do some instructing. You work with the BMW Car Club as an instructor. Why? I got to ask that because I always find it interesting to ask instructors that question because, well, yeah, why? Tell me.
Oh, part of it's because it's cool to be around a lot of cool cars. Okay. Right. It's what we were talking about before. It's fun to be around a lot of fun people. Also, it's really fun to take somebody who is maybe there for their first time and get them from that franticness of, oh, I can do this, to, you know what? Let's just slow way down and practice being smooth. And let's do a few laps that way. And then see how you feel and how much quicker you're going after that. And they're going, oh my God, really? Right. And there's a huge change to somebody who is a more senior driver to say, what if you were to move the apex forward 5 feet? Let's give that try a couple of times. And they go, oh, wow. Because the car feels so much different. All of that sort of stuff. You can be on the throttle earlier, I love teaching. And there is that instant feedback in a car, even when somebody else is driving.
Right.
It's just right there.
Yeah. Yeah, you certainly know when they do it right and when they do it wrong, don't you?
And when they do it wrong, oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually, the Pacific Race, this guy was so comfortable and whatnot, and we're coming down to turn 1, and we're going, I don't know, better than 100 miles an hour, and he's just enjoying it, and I'm going, okay, now look through the corner. And I look over, and he's still looking straight. Look through the corner. All right, my voice getting louder and louder. All right, turn now. Oh, okay. It's just kind of mesmerized, and you're going, okay, please. Yeah.
It is surprising.
Yeah.
How many drivers can actually forget about where they've got to turn? It's like,
That's right.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I think, and then it goes back to what you said earlier, just, get your eyes up and look further ahead. They're probably so, hey, we always make a big thing about be in the moment, but sometimes you can be too far in the moment or too much in the moment. You really need to be thinking about where you're going. So
it's kind of like, wake up.
Yeah.
Not a team.
Yeah. So last question, Frank. What's the one question you wish I'd ask you?
Oh. That's a great question. I don't know where you got that. So, well, one of the things, Ross, that we talk about is all the time is the positive.
Mm-hmm.
And let me tell you a negative, not a negative about driving, but a mistake that I made. All right. You didn't ask me about what mistakes have I made.
Yeah.
I was racing in Portland. It was actually we were in a qualifying session, and we were in Pro 3 cars, and it had rained but dried, right? So there's a dry line, whatnot. And coming around to the back side, I looked. I'd noticed him behind me before was Lee Keene. Lee Keene, who's won at Le Mans, and he's behind me in a Pro 3 car, but I'm ahead of him, right? And so we're coming out to the backstretch, and I thought, I'm not going to, I know he'll get me at the end of the backstretch, but I'm going to make it through here. And so I'm looking at him, and what did I do? I touched my left rear wheel on the paint on the curbing, right?
Right.
I've never had a car reverse directions as quickly as that. I mean, it was just instantaneous. And of course, it slapped the wall with the front, and then it came back and slapped the wall with the rear. I mean, it heavily damaged the car.
And by the way, it did that, not you.
Exactly right. Damn car.
Yeah.
Oh, and I'm going, oh, no. So I'm crushed, and the car comes back on. And Lee comes up and says, you knew I was coming. Never look behind you.
Right.
Never look behind you when you know somebody's faster is coming. Just let him go by you. And I'm going, yeah. So what was I doing? My head was not in my car. My head was in his car.
Right.
That was a huge, expensive lesson. And, we got to pay attention to those things too. You can't just beat yourself up, although I still do. You learn from that and you go, yeah, okay, that won't happen again.
Yeah, and there's two kinds of drivers, right? Those who have crashed and those who will.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, right.
Yeah. So
There's
fortunately, you got that out of your way there.
Well, then how come it happened again? When I once again lost focus. It's all about focus. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, we could talk about focus for another couple of hours.
Well, that's true.
We could focus on that. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, no. Okay.
But I guess, we're kind of running out of time here and want to say thanks, Frank, for sharing your obvious passion and enthusiasm for the sport and your experience and everything. But before we go, what are you currently working on? What are you doing? Could be in motorsport, could be elsewhere. That, if people want to know more about what you do and how to contact you or whatever, something you want to share with people?
Well, sure. I'm still doing some work. So if you wanted to go to strategicintent.com, and what it said on my race car was, know where you're going, get there fast, which is what it was about racing. That's also how I help people in business. But then I think, I know I told you I sold the race car and I bought a camera. So now I'm doing photography. And if you want to go to Frank Greif, Greif, photography.com, that's my website with a bunch of my photos.
Cool. And I'll put links in the show notes about that as well. So.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, thanks, Frank. That was fun. I enjoyed that. And, as I said, always say, keep having fun.
I will. And now you got me all jazzed up again. I'm definitely I got to get out the helmet and clean it and I got to get ready. Here we go.
Okay. Well, let me know because I'll come with you.
All right. Thanks, Ross.
Thanks, Frank. Each episode, I'll share a quick speed secret with you. A short reminder that I hope will stick in your mind and be useful the next time you're on track. Here's today's tip. When driving in the rain, initiate slowly, react quickly. What I mean by that is make all of your inputs into the controls, the steering wheel and the brake and throttle pedals, as smoothly as you can. But if the car begins to slide, don't wait. Catch it right away. I see too many drivers who feel their car begin to slide in the rain and let it, thinking, I got it. Whoa, I don't got it. You're better off catching a slide immediately, but still, smoothly. If you'd like more tips, advice, and resources, check out my website at speedsecrets.com. And if you like what you heard today, please subscribe to the Speed Secrets podcast. And even better, leave a review on iTunes. That would be huge and something I'd really appreciate. Also, please share with your friends. Thanks. Hey, keep learning and having fun.